Hello, my name is Carlos Pereira Cruz, and this is the podcast 15 Minutes of Pharma. Welcome. So today's episode takes us back to where everything really began, okay? Not just in medicine, but in the pharmaceutical industry as an industrial system. Our guest is someone who has lived this industry from the inside, from fermentation tanks to factory floors, from FDA audits to complex turnaround projects. Manuel Fernandes is an API specialist, former industrial director and consultant with decades of hands-on experience. And today we are asking a deceptively simple question. Where did the API industry come from? Who were the pioneers? What technologies made it possible? And why does this story begin almost inevitably with penicillin? So, Manuel, let's start at the beginning, okay? So, from your perspective, why is penicillin such a defining moment, not just medically, but industrially?
Well, Carlos, thank you very much for your kind introduction. And going directly to your question, if we really want to understand the origins of the pharmaceutical industry, we inevitably have to start with penicillin. In fact, penicillin was the first true watershed moment, not only in medicine, but in the pharmaceutical industry as a modern industrial sector.
Manuel, when you say watershed, so what actually changed forever with that?
But to answer your question, Carlos, let me dig it a little bit deeper and start from the very beginning with Fleming's accidental discovery of penicillin in 1928. Well, this accidental discovery was only the first step. I would say that the real miracle came 10 years later with the work of Chen and Flory, who were able to transform what we could eventually call a laboratory curiosity into a substance that could be purified and used clinically. And I think it helps a little bit to understand the importance of penicillin, to look at the real human story. In March 1942, Ann Miller was hospitalized after developing a very severe blood infection. So her condition was truly critical, high fever, bacteria everywhere in her blood, and every available treatment at the time had failed. So Ann's doctor, he decided to try something completely experimental, penicillin. So, Ann's doctor, after making some urgent calls, he managed to secure a small vial with 5.5 grams of penicillin, Carlos. And this small quantity at that time represented about half of all the penicillin available in the United States. So, Ann Miller's doctor, he had to improvise the dose and the administration schedule. And right after, Ann received her first intravenous injection. And within a few hours, she began to ameliorate. Her fever began to fall. And 2 days later, she was up in the bed and taking her first meals after this whole health problem. So Ann really became the first person whose life was clearly saved by penicillin. And she went on to live for more than 50 years. So, at that moment, it became clear to all the healthcare professionals at the time that the war against infectious disease had changed forever.
And so, Manuel, at that moment, did people already understand what this would mean for industry?
Well, Carlos, I think this was somehow the case of Ann Miller was a real proof of concept. I think it was an eye opener for the for the healthcare professionals, well, if we can call it in general terms. So it was clear after that moment, this history, it was clear, it became clear to everyone that medicine had finally a molecule capable of curing infections that had previously been fatal. And obviously, this created, real industrial demand, well, at scale. Obviously, World War II was a catalyst that somehow forced a mass industrialization of penicillin production with, companies such as Pfizer, Merck, and Squibb playing a central role here. And well, we can say that this really paved the way for the birth of the contemporary pharmaceutical industry and, well, for the first modern pharmaceutical manufacturing plants. Well, the race to produce penicillin led to the development of large-scale technologies that were subsequently applied to everything that followed: vitamins, steroids, semi-synthetic antibiotics, and small molecules. Well, there were obviously several players, several contributions to this whole story, and if you allow me, I would like to highlight the contribution of Lider Laboratories. Lider played, I would say, an absolutely decisive role in strain improvement. Most famously through the well-known Moldy Mary, who accidentally discovered on a watermelon a strain of Penicillium chrysogenum with much higher yields, well, when compared with the ones provided by the current strains at the time. However, Carlos, the leap toward industrialization, in which, and this is central, this is a central point, in which the development and the introduction of the deep tank fermentation played a vital role. And this was, of course, I'm a chemical engineer, and you are a chemical engineer as well. But you can believe me, this is absolutely true. It's absolutely fair in my view to say this. So this was really primarily a triumph of chemical engineering, led by teams at Squibb and shortly thereafter at Pfizer. You know, the separation between science and engineering never truly existed in this industry, and I would argue that it still does not exist today, whether we are talking about APIs, high potency APIs, bioprocessing, or well, whatever. Carlos, this also helps to explain why the so well-known Pfizer became a pharmaceutical giant so quickly. Pfizer did not begin as a pharma company in the classical sense. Pfizer was a company that mastered chemical engineering applied to fermentation, and so Pfizer was on the forefront, and it acted very swiftly to convert its former chemical plants into deep fermentation units. And so Pfizer, within a short period of time, became the world's largest producer of penicillin.
So, Manuel, can we say that it is at that moment that we can say that pharma stopped being a laboratory activity? Mm-hmm.
I think so, Carlos. I think this was really a turning point moment, because what we had generally before penicillin was really, small laboratories doing small, almost artisanal preparations where the scale was necessary, very small, very small. With penicillin, everything is different. So the potential utilization was worldwide, that there was worldwide demand for this kind of product. And so, well, I think that we can really say that this is where the modern pharmaceutical model was born. So, I would say it resulted from a virtuous combination of science, engineering, scale, control, and repeatability. Because the whole paradigm have to change. The production processes have to be invented, and the equipment specifically designed and developed to accommodate the novel penicillin project. Well, it was this collision between the scientific discovery and the industrial necessity that that gave rise to the first large pharmaceutical manufacturing units. And I would say that this is where the modern biochemical engineering was born, and undoubtedly where the roots of the API industry lie.
Okay. So what strikes me in what you've just described is that penicillin wasn't only a scientific breakthrough. Yeah, it was also an engineering nightmare. So let's go a level deeper into that. Can you explain why fermentation became such a cornerstone technology, and why scaling penicillin forced the industry to invent entirely new ways of manufacturing?
Sure, that's a great question, Carlos. And let me tell you that penicillin was most probably one of the greatest technological challenges of the 20th century.
So, sorry, what made it so hard compared to other molecules?
Yeah, penicillin was a very unstable molecule, very, very difficult to purify, difficult to concentrate, and at least initially, it was produced, in small culture plates and shallow trays. So it was basically a surface fermentation, which implied only small production volumes and obviously very, very limited output. When we talk about penicillin, there is a technical detail that I find that is absolutely fascinating, and that, in my opinion, it helps to explain why the industrialization of this molecule lies at the origin of the modern pharmaceutical industry. As we mentioned, the first penicillin production processes used shallow trays. So the culture depth was only a few centimeters, and oxygen entered by natural diffusion only, without any mechanical agitation whatsoever. So this was an extremely limited, almost artisanal process, which was virtually impossible to scale. And so the major challenge, and this is where the true industrial epic begins, was to move from this almost laboratory scale model to deep tank fermentation, with agitated vessels, with forced aeration, with temperature control, with foam control, which actually proved extremely difficult to solve, and above all, sterility, which is a key point to consider here. And to accomplish all this, Carlos, it was required something entirely new, which we can condense in one idea, which is the application of industrial chemical engineering to a living biological system. And and this is at this stage, I think that there is a historical figure who I believe deserves a special mention here. The leadership of this whole technological leap that led to the breakthroughs, all the breakthroughs that were necessary to industrialize the production of penicillin. This leadership was provided by Margaret Hutchinson Rousseau, a brilliant chemical engineer working for Squibb, who led the team responsible for developing the first industrial deep tank fermenters for penicillin. What Margaret and her team achieved was truly revolutionary. So they did the design of the modern agitation systems, as we can find them in modern fermenters, air dispersion systems, dissolved oxygen control, and foam control as well. And all this, Carlos, while keeping an extremely sensitive microorganism viable. We can say without any hesitation, Carlos, that without this breakthrough, penicillin would never have progressed from a scientific curiosity to a medicine produced on the scale of tons. And this story teaches us something fundamental, Carlos. And from its very beginning, the pharmaceutical industry has never depended solely on discovering molecules, but rather on the ability to manufacture them in a robust, safe, and repeatable way. In fact, the leap to industrial scale required inventing almost everything from scratch. Deep fermenters, specialized downstream processing, new extraction techniques, new filtration techniques, and crystallization procedures. And these created the technological backbone of the API industry, meaning fermentation for early biological products, such as natural antibiotics, downstream processing for purification, and later chemical synthesis for the small molecules that would dominate the market for decades. So I would argue that the idea that an API is the result of science plus engineering plus operations was really born in this period. And in my view, that idea remains fully valid today.
Okay, so listening to this, it becomes clear that antibiotics didn't just cure infections. They somehow forced pharma to grow up as an industry. So let me ask it directly. Did antibiotics, and penicillin in particular, actually shape the modern pharmaceutical industry as we know it today? So, and how much of today's API world still carries that legacy?
Well, Carlos, again, that's a fantastic question, and the short answer is yes, undoubtedly. And not only because of the therapeutic revolution that they enabled, but because as well of the industrial revolution that they triggered. You know, companies like Pfizer, Merck, and Squibb, they all industrialized and scaled processes and equipment specifically designed for penicillin production. And they did it, under really extraordinary conditions. And from that moment on, it became clear that pharmaceutical products could be manufactured at large scale with controlled quality, which really was a change in the paradigm. So, for instance, the development of tetracyclines, which began in the second half of the 1940s, followed this same exact model. Indeed, tetracycline development required expertise in fermentation, expertise in industrial scale operations, a rigorous quality control, and the ability to manage very complex manufacturing processes. Carlos, penicillin and tetracycline families they represent everything that is difficult and challenging in the development and production of a classical API. I mean, they both required fermentation plus complex downstream processing, purification, attention to chemical degradation phenomena, attention to the stability of the molecules, crystallization techniques, and regulatory, very keen attention to regulatory compliance in all the steps required to manufacture this product. So everything that followed, Carlos, tetracyclines, cephalosporins, erythromycins, everything followed this same exact model. we will not exaggerate to say that if we have a global API industry today, it is because penicillin forced pharmacy, in its broadest sense, to industrialize science. And well, for me personally, working on penicillin and later on tetracycline production was, a complete education in chemical engineering, microbiology, and later on operations and site management activities.
Okay. Well, what's interesting is that this story doesn't stop in the US, right? So after the initial American phase, so Europe seems to have taken this model and run with it. So how did Europe pick up this industrial and technological momentum?
Yeah, Carlos, and that is one of the, I would say, one of the most interesting aspects of this story is that, well, after the so-called American phase of penicillin, Europe embraced this opportunity with an extraordinary entrepreneurial spirit. The penicillin project created an entire industry and gave rise to what would become maybe some of the most profitable companies in history. But not only the American companies involved in the project, but also British firms such as Glaxo, French companies such as Ron Poulenc, and even Swiss companies like Ciba-Geigy and Sandoz. So penicillin is not just the story of a drug. Penicillin created, an industrial model. It created companies. It built engineering capabilities, established global value chains, and it really laid the foundations of the modern pharmaceutical industry as we know it today. And Carlos, this movement opened the door to companies such as Ovion, Cipam, both in Portugal, companies like Doticon and Flama, amongst many, many others in Europe. All these companies were founded by visionary scientists, chemists, and engineers, with courage, determination, and, a certain degree of stubbornness, who decided to transform science into industrial capability. So these were strongly technical and scientific, often family-owned companies focused on scientific excellence and process engineering. And they all share the common DNA: scientific rigor, entrepreneurial courage, and a great deal of engineering, which was a key capability in these companies. For instance, in Portugal, the founders of both Ovion and Cipin, which were both established in the 1950s and early 60s of last century, they had a vision, a global vision, and they had an imperative, a clear imperative to address the international markets, particularly the United States market, which, required clearing the FDA barrier, which at the time was not, a small feat. For instance, and to illustrate this a little bit more, Cipin, where I began my career, was deeply involved in building and starting up antibiotic plants. Well, and I started on a tech transfer project for potassium penicillin G to India. And one key innovation of this project was replacing traditional filtration with whole broth extraction using centrifuges. This allowed us to reduce investment and improve yields. And it turns out that this site was the first in the world to adopt this tech approach. So I would say that this entrepreneurial DNA continues to shape the culture of the European API industry to this day. So, I would say that just to sum this up, to wrap this up a little bit, that really penicillin gave birth to the modern pharmaceutical industry. Somehow it forced science to inform and to become engineering, and engineering to become industry. But that founding moment did not freeze the industry in time. And I guess that we will have opportunity in next episodes to further develop this story.
So in the next episode, we will talk about what happened to the industry in the decades between penicillin and the CDMO model that we see today. So join us in episode 2.